This happened 4 years ago, and even now I strictly avoid staying anywhere near isolated beaches. At the time, I had just turned 24 and had finally managed to save enough money to take a real vacation. Nothing extravagant, just a few days away from work to clear my head after what had been one of the most stressful years of my life. My friend Claire suggested renting a beach house on Gull Point, a quiet peninsula several hours north of where we lived. She'd found a listing online for an older home overlooking the ocean, and because it was still early in the season, the rental price was surprisingly cheap. There were 4 of us making the trip: Claire, her boyfriend Mason, my coworker Olivia, and me. The drive took most of the afternoon. As we got closer, the busy highways gave way to narrow coastal roads surrounded by dense pine trees and marshland. Cell service became weaker with every mile, and by the time we reached Gull Point, none of us had more than a single bar. The town itself couldn't have had more than a few hundred residents. There was a tiny grocery store, 1 diner, a weathered marina, and a handful of houses scattered along the shoreline. Our rental sat at the very end of a gravel road. It was the last house before the coastline turned into protected dunes stretching for miles. The owner met us in the driveway. He was an older man who introduced himself as Mr. Donnelly. After handing over the keys, he gave us a quick tour before stopping near the back door. "If you hear noises outside after dark," he said casually, "don't go looking." We all laughed. He didn't. "I mean it," he added. Claire asked if there were bears nearby. "No." "Coyotes?" He shook his head. The dunes carry sound in strange ways. Sometimes people think they hear someone calling for help. Sometimes they hear footsteps. It's never worth checking. The comment was so oddly specific that none of us knew how to respond. A few seconds later, he smiled as if he'd realized how strange he sounded. "Enjoy your stay." With that, he climbed into his truck and drove away. The 4 of us stood there in awkward silence. "Well," Mason laughed, "that wasn't creepy at all. The house itself was beautiful. It had huge windows facing the ocean, a wraparound porch, and an open living room with a stone fireplace." After unpacking, we spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the beach. There wasn't another person in sight. No umbrellas, no lifeguards, no families. Just endless sand, rolling waves, and the occasional seabird drifting overhead. By sunset, we had started a small fire in the pit behind the house. We roasted marshmallows, played cards, and stayed outside until the stars filled the sky. Around 11, Olivia decided to head inside. Claire followed a few minutes later. Mason and I stayed by the fire talking about work, travel, and everything else that usually comes up when you've known someone for years. Eventually, we put the fire out and locked the house before going to bed. My room was on the 2nd floor overlooking the beach. The sound of the ocean made it easy to fall asleep. Sometime during the night, I woke to what I thought was someone knocking. 3 slow knocks. Not on my bedroom door, on the window. I frowned and checked my phone. It was 258. Sorry, you were in. The knocks came again. Tap, tap, tap. I climbed out of bed and pulled the curtain aside. Nothing. Only darkness and the silver reflection of moonlight on the water. Feeling ridiculous, I started to close the curtain. Then movement caught my eye. Someone was walking along the shoreline. They carried no flashlight, no phone. Just a small lantern swinging gently at their side. They were too far away to make out any details, but they appeared to be heading straight toward the house. I watched for nearly a minute. Who takes a walk on an empty beach at 3 in the morning? The person suddenly stopped. Even from that distance, I had the uncomfortable feeling they were looking directly up at me. Then very slowly they raised one arm, not waving, pointing, right toward the dunes beside the house. A second later, the lantern went out. The figure disappeared into pitch blackness. I stood there staring at the empty beach, waiting for my eyes to adjust. Nothing. It was as if whoever I'd seen had vanished into thin air. Trying to convince myself I was simply overtired, I climbed back into bed. I had just started drifting off again when I heard another sound. Footsteps, not outside, inside the house. They moved slowly across the 1st floor. One board creaked, then another, then complete silence. I sat upright. Claire's bedroom was downstairs. Maybe she'd gone to the kitchen for water. That had to be it. But then I heard the front doorknob rattle, once, twice, followed by the unmistakable sound of the deadbolt unlocking. My bedroom door flew open before I even realized I'd left it unlocked. Claire stood there, pale as a ghost. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Before I could answer, a voice drifted up from the first floor. Soft, calm, almost friendly. "Is anyone home?" Neither of us recognized it. Claire and I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at one another. Neither of us said a word. The voice downstairs had been completely calm, almost polite, but that somehow made it even more unsettling. "Is anyone home?" It came again, a little louder this time. I reached for my phone and checked the screen. No signal. Not even an emergency connection. "Mason locked the front door," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. "I know he did." We listened. The footsteps continued moving through the first floor. They weren't hurried. Whoever was downstairs sounded completely comfortable, as if they had every right to be there. A bedroom door opened somewhere below us. Then another. Drawers slid open. Cabinets creaked. The stranger wasn't just walking through the house. They were searching it. Claire quietly backed into my room and shut the door without letting it click. "We have to wake the others." I nodded. Olivia's room was directly across the hall. We slipped out as quietly as we could and tapped on her door. She answered almost immediately, her face full of confusion. "What's going on?" "Someone's inside." Her expression changed instantly. Together we hurried toward Mason's room. He opened the door before we even knocked. "I heard it too," he whispered. For several seconds, all four of us stood together in the dark hallway. Another sound echoed from downstairs, glass breaking. That was enough. Mason pulled out his phone. Nothing. No service. "Mine doesn't work either," Olivia whispered. Claire suddenly remembered something. The landline. We hurried downstairs as quietly as we could, staying close together. The first floor was almost completely dark. Moonlight spilled through the large windows, casting long, twisted shadows across the living room. The voice had stopped. So had the footsteps. That silence felt 100 times worse than the noise. The landline sat on a small table beside the kitchen. Mason picked it up. Dead. The cord had been cut cleanly in half. My stomach tightened. Whoever had entered the house hadn't stumbled inside by accident. They had planned this. Then a loud bang echoed from the back porch. All four of us jumped. Another bang followed. Something or someone was hitting the back door. Not trying to break it down. Just knocking. 3 slow knocks. Exactly like the ones I'd heard on my bedroom window. None of us moved. After nearly a minute, the knocking stopped. We waited. Nothing. Mason slowly stepped toward one of the living room windows and carefully lifted the edge of the curtain. "I don't see anybody." Then his face went completely pale. "There are footprints." We joined him at the window. The sand surrounding the porch was covered in fresh footprints. They circled the entire house, back and forth, again and again, as though someone had spent hours walking around it. But what disturbed me most was where they ended. They stopped directly beneath my bedroom window. Claire whispered, "They knew exactly which room you were in." A sudden beam of light swept across the yard. Headlights. A pickup truck was slowly making its way down the gravel road. Relief flooded through all of us. It must be the owner. The truck pulled into the driveway. "Mr. Donnelly stepped out carrying a flashlight. Before any of us could open the door, he raised one hand. "No." He motioned for us to stay inside. Then he slowly turned toward the dunes. His flashlight moved back and forth across the tall grass. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then another light appeared. A lantern. The exact same lantern I'd seen on the beach. It floated through the darkness between the dunes. Someone was carrying it, hiding in the brush. "Mr. Donnelly called out, "I've already contacted the sheriff." The lantern stopped moving. Everything became perfectly still. Then the light disappeared. Not gradually, instantly, as though someone had suddenly covered it. Within minutes, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived. They searched the beach, the dunes, and the property for nearly 2 hours. Just before sunrise, one of the deputies called us outside. He pointed toward a narrow trail leading through the dunes. Fresh footprints stretched away from the house. Only one set. The strange thing was, they didn't come from the road, they came directly from the beach. The trail eventually ended at a weathered wooden shack hidden among the dunes, nearly half a mile away. Inside, they found blankets, canned food, empty water bottles, and stacks of old newspapers dating back several years. Whoever had been living there had clearly been watching the coastline for a long time. The deputies searched the surrounding area, but no one was ever found. Before we left town that morning, I finally asked Mr. Donnelly why he'd warned us not to investigate noises after dark. He sighed, looking out toward the dunes. "You're not the first renters that's happened to." "What do you mean?" "Every couple of years, someone reports hearing voices outside that house." "Have they ever caught the person?" He shook his head. "They always disappear before anyone arrives." Months later, Claire sent me an article from the local newspaper. During construction on another vacation home nearly 2 miles down the beach, workers discovered a hidden shelter built beneath an abandoned fishing shed. Investigators believe someone had been secretly moving between empty coastal properties for years, living unnoticed during the off-season before disappearing whenever tourists returned. Whether it was the same person who came to our rental, no one could say. The case was eventually closed. No arrests were ever made. I've stayed in plenty of hotels since then, cabins, apartments, even mountain lodges, but I've never rented another isolated beach house. Sometimes late at night, I'll remember those 3 gentle knocks on the window. Then I'll remember that friendly voice drifting through the dark house. "Is anyone home?" It wasn't the question that frightened me. It was the fact that whoever asked it already knew the answer.